The air was thick with tension, the kind that only comes when something extraordinary is about to unfold. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the deserted landscape. Amelia stood alone at the edge of the valley, her breath shallow as she watched the sky. The peculiar object, far too large and too silent, hovered just beyond the clouds, an unearthly shape that defied explanation. It wasn't a plane, nor a bird. It was something else entirely, something alien. Her heart pounded in her chest, the distant rumble of thunder making her skin prickle. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she tried to capture the impossible image on camera. But the device refused to cooperate, flickering and buzzing as though it, too, sensed the magnitude of the moment. The wind picked up suddenly, swirling around her like an unseen force. It carried whispers, soft, barely audible, but Amelia could have sworn she heard a voice calling her name. Amelia. It whispered. She spun around, but there was no one there. No one to explain the unease settling in her bones. She turned back to the sky, but the object had vanished. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. But this wasn't a dream. This was real. It was happening. Right here, right now. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet shook violently, a low rumble vibrating through her legs. She staggered, struggling to maintain her balance as the earth seemed to split apart before her eyes. The strange hum of the object filled her ears, growing louder, deeper, as if it was directly above her. And then, in a flash of light, it was gone. The sky was empty again, and the only sound left was her own ragged breathing. What was that? Amelia whispered to herself, her mind racing. She had seen things in her life that couldn't be easily explained, but this? This was unlike anything she had ever witnessed. She stumbled backward, her feet scrambling to find purchase on the uneven ground. Her mind screamed at her to run, to get out of there, but something deeper, something inside her gut, told her to stay. To understand what was happening. The first wave of panic hit her hard, but she quickly swallowed it down. Amelia wasn't the type to flee from a challenge. She had survived worse. She had seen the kind of horrors that would break most people, but she was still standing. She had learned to push through, to adapt, to survive. But this was different. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her from her spiraling thoughts. She fumbled with it, nearly dropping it as she answered the call. The voice on the other end was familiar, but the urgency in it was unsettling. Amelia, you need to get out of there. Now, her brother's voice crackled through the receiver. It's not safe. They're coming for you. Her heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What's going on? I don't know yet, but the government's tracking you. You're not supposed to have seen what you saw. They'll find you soon. Just get out of there, go, now. Before she could respond, the call dropped, and the phone went silent. Amelia stared at the screen, feeling the weight of his words settle over her like a dark cloud. Government? What did he mean by that? Why would they be interested in her? Without wasting another second, Amelia turned and ran, her legs propelling her through the rocky terrain, heart pounding in her chest. She needed to find somewhere safe, somewhere hidden. But every step felt like a race against time. She didn't know who was after her or what they wanted, but the feeling of being hunted was all too real. The air seemed to press in around her, suffocating her, and she stumbled, falling to her knees. The wind carried that same strange hum, louder now, almost deafening. She pressed her hands to her ears, but it did nothing to block it out. The sound filled her entire being, a vibration deep inside her bones. Then, in the distance, she saw it, another flash of light. A blinding glow that momentarily illuminated the landscape, leaving behind a streak of color that seemed to burn into the very fabric of the sky. It was as though the world itself had paused, holding its breath. Amelia didn't wait to see more. She scrambled to her feet, ignoring the cuts on her arms as she pushed forward. Her mind raced, trying to make sense of everything, but the pieces didn't fit. What had she just witnessed? And why had her brother warned her? She reached the edge of the forest, her pulse still racing. The trees offered a momentary shield, but the fear that gripped her heart refused to let go. She needed answers, but she had no idea where to begin. Who could she trust? Her family? The authorities? She had no idea who was involved in this, or why they wanted to find her. Just as she was about to push deeper into the woods, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, with eyes that gleamed unnaturally in the dim light. Amelia froze, her instincts screaming at her to run. "Amelia," the man said, his voice low and commanding. "We need to talk." She didn't move. Her body tensed, ready to flee at the slightest provocation. But the man didn't seem threatening, not at first. His face was stern, but not unkind. Still, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. There was something unsettling about him. He was too calm, too controlled. "What do you want from me?" Amelia demanded, her voice trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it. "I know what you saw. And I know you don't understand it. But you need to. You're part of something much bigger than you realize." Amelia shook her head, stepping back. "No, you don't understand. I don't know what any of this is, or why it's happening to me. I just want to be left alone." The man's expression softened, though his eyes remained sharp. "You can't hide from this, Amelia. There are things in this world, things you're not supposed to know. But you've seen too much now. And now they'll come for you. They're already looking for you. I'm here to help." The words hung in the air between them, thick with meaning. The sound of distant footsteps broke through the tension, growing louder. Amelia's breath hitched in her throat. Someone else was coming. "I don't know who you are," she said, her voice steely. "But I'm not going anywhere with you." The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. "Then you'll have to make them come for you." Suddenly, everything in the forest went silent. Even the wind stilled. The world around them felt like it was holding its breath. Amelia's eyes darted to the shadows, but nothing moved. "I'll take my chances," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had no idea who this man was, but her instincts told her to trust him, if only just for now. The man gave a short, clipped nod. "It's your choice. But make it quickly. You have no time left." The darkness of the woods seemed to swallow Amelia whole as she moved deeper into the trees, her footsteps light but deliberate. The strange man's words echoed in her mind, reverberating through her thoughts like an ominous drumbeat. "You have no time left." His voice, calm yet laced with urgency, had rattled her in a way she couldn't explain. She had no idea who he was, but he clearly knew far more about the situation than she did. The further she walked, the thicker the trees became. The forest had an eerie stillness, one that was unnerving, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen. She looked over her shoulder every few seconds, half expecting to see someone, or something, lurking just behind her. But the woods remained silent, save for the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. She had to get to the bottom of this. What had she seen in the sky? What was the object? Why had it disappeared so suddenly? And why was her brother so insistent that she leave immediately? Amelia pushed through the dense foliage, her eyes scanning the shadows. The world felt too quiet. The kind of quiet that made you question whether you were truly alone. Suddenly, the hairs on the back of her neck stood up. The faintest sound, barely audible, came from behind her. She stopped dead in her tracks, her heart racing. The sound wasn't natural, and it was too close. Like a low hum, vibrating through the air. She spun around, her breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. Nothing. The woods were still. The silence was almost deafening. Her mind began to race. Am I imagining things? Is this just my nerves? But then, she heard it again, a soft, almost imperceptible sound that seemed to come from the trees themselves. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't alone. Amelia took a cautious step back, her eyes darting to every corner of the forest, looking for any sign of movement. That's when she saw it, a figure, barely visible in the darkness, watching her from the other side of the clearing. It was tall, its shape obscured by the shadows, but the way it stood, unmoving, too still, was enough to send a chill down her spine. Should I run? She wanted to, but her legs felt frozen, rooted to the ground. Her mind screamed at her to flee, but her body didn't respond. Then, as if sensing her fear, the figure stepped forward, its face coming into view. The stranger was a woman, older, with sharp, piercing eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. She wore a long, dark coat that blended with the night, and her hair was tied back in a tight knot. There was something about her, something unsettling. Amelia felt like she had seen her before, but the memory was vague, fleeting. Amelia, the woman's voice was soft, but her words sliced through the air with an undeniable intensity. We need to talk. Amelia took a step back, her pulse quickening. Who are you? How do you know my name? The woman's lips curled into a faint, knowing smile. You're not the first person to see it. And you won't be the last. See what? Amelia asked, her voice trembling despite her best efforts to remain calm. What's going on? What did I see in the sky? The woman's gaze shifted, her eyes narrowing as though weighing her words carefully. You saw something you were never supposed to. The object, the phenomenon. It's not of this world. But it's not just about what you saw, it's about what you've become part of. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Amelia's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. She had always been a skeptic, a woman of science and reason, but this was beyond anything she could explain. What do you mean? She asked, her voice shaking slightly. The woman stepped closer, her presence both calming and intimidating. You've been chosen, Amelia. Chosen to bear witness to something greater than yourself. But there are others. People who will stop at nothing to keep the truth hidden. They won't hesitate to silence anyone who stands in their way. Amelia swallowed hard, her throat dry. Who are these people? And why me? I can't explain everything right now, the woman said, her voice now tinged with urgency. But you need to understand, you're caught in the middle of something much bigger than you realize. The object you saw, the one in the sky, it's part of a pattern. A series of events that began long before you were born. You're just a small piece of a puzzle that's been in motion for centuries. Amelia felt the weight of the woman's words pressing on her chest. A puzzle? What was she talking about? The truth about the object is locked away, the woman continued, hidden by those who have always controlled the narrative. They've been manipulating the world's perception for years, and now they're worried that people like you, people who see too much, are going to ruin everything. The woman's voice grew darker, more intense. You're a threat to them. Amelia. And they'll come for you. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. A threat? How could she, an ordinary woman with no special powers, be a threat to anyone? And who was this woman? What did she know that was so dangerous? Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps reached her ears. Heavy, deliberate, unmistakable. The woman's eyes flickered toward the sound, then back to Amelia. They're here. Amelia didn't have time to react. The shadows around them seemed to deepen, and in the blink of an eye, a group of figures emerged from the woods. Tall, dressed in dark, military-style uniforms, their faces obscured by masks. They moved with precision, surrounding the woman and Amelia in a matter of seconds. Amelia's heart raced in her chest as she tried to calculate her next move, but her mind was clouded with confusion and fear. The woman remained calm, her eyes scanning the group, but Amelia could sense the tension in her stance. She was ready for something. But what? One of the figures stepped forward, his voice deep and commanding. "Step aside," he ordered the woman. "We're taking her in." Amelia's mind spun. Take her in? What did they want with her? And why was this woman so calm? Didn't she know what these people were capable of? "You won't get away with this," the woman said, her voice steady. "You've underestimated her. You'll all pay the price for this." The man didn't respond. He simply nodded to the others, who began to move toward Amelia. Her heart hammered in her chest as she realized they were coming for her. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The government had been tracking her. They had known she saw something, and now they were here to erase the evidence. They didn't want anyone to know the truth. And they would stop at nothing to make sure that no one, especially Amelia, got in their way. Amelia's breath came in short, panicked gasps as the armed figures closed in on her. Her heart raced, the adrenaline surging through her veins, but her mind remained clouded with questions. Who were these people? What did they want with me? The woman beside her stood unmoving, calm despite the tension crackling in the air. Amelia couldn't understand it. She had just met this stranger, and yet there was an unspoken connection between them, as though this moment had been inevitable. But the group of masked figures wasn't giving her any time to think. They were here to take her. To silence her. "You don't have to do this," Amelia said, her voice trembling but defiant. Her hands balled into fists at her sides, her body preparing for a fight she wasn't sure she could win. "I don't know what you're after, but I'm not going anywhere with you." The man who had spoken earlier, the one who had given the orders, took a step forward. His expression was unreadable behind the mask, but his posture was threatening. He moved with the precision of someone who was used to controlling a situation, and Amelia felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force pressing down on her. "You don't have a choice," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We've been ordered to bring you in. You saw something you shouldn't have. And now you're going to help us understand why." Amelia's eyes flickered toward the woman beside her. The stranger seemed unbothered by the growing tension, her stance relaxed as if she had been through this kind of confrontation countless times before. "Why don't you just leave?" the woman said, her voice cutting through the silence. She didn't raise her tone, there was no panic in her voice, only the unmistakable authority of someone who knew the odds. "If you think you can take Amelia, you're gravely mistaken." The man scoffed, taking another step toward them, but before he could speak, the woman's eyes narrowed slightly, and for a split second, it was as if the temperature around them dropped. Amelia's skin prickled with unease. "Move aside," the man demanded again, his voice now carrying a hint of uncertainty. He must have sensed something in the woman's calm demeanor. Amelia didn't know what was going on, but she could feel the tension building, and her instincts screamed that things were about to get far worse. Amelia's heart was pounding in her chest. She was trapped, outnumbered, and surrounded by people who wanted something from her, something she didn't understand. What had I seen? What made me so important? The woman beside her shifted, her hand moving to her coat pocket. For a split second, Amelia thought she saw a glint of something metallic, a weapon? But the woman's movement was so smooth, so controlled, it almost felt choreographed, as though this was all a part of something much larger. The man seemed to notice the same movement, his eyes narrowing. "Don't do something you'll regret," he warned. But before anyone could make another move, a distant sound reached Amelia's ears, a loud, piercing whine that made her blood run cold. It was high-pitched, almost like the hum of an electrical device, but there was a strange frequency to it, a disturbing vibration that seemed to resonate with something deep inside her. The man and the woman both looked toward the source of the sound, the air around them charged with electricity. "Get ready," the woman muttered, her voice barely audible. Amelia couldn't explain it, but she knew instinctively that something was about to happen. The sound grew louder, almost unbearable, and in the distance, the sky above them seemed to ripple, the clouds parting as though being torn apart by some unseen force. And then, without warning, the ground shook. The trees around them began to tremble, and Amelia could feel the vibrations beneath her feet as if the earth itself was coming alive. The noise grew deafening, an otherworldly hum that seemed to cut through the very air, shaking her bones. Before anyone could react, a bright flash of light illuminated the clearing, blinding Amelia for a split second. She threw up her hands to shield her eyes, but the brilliance of the light persisted, overwhelming everything else in her vision. The sound reached a deafening crescendo, and then, silence. The world seemed to stop. The hum was gone. The shaking stopped. And in the wake of the silence, there was something else, something far more unsettling. Standing before her, hovering just above the ground, was the object. The same strange, otherworldly craft she had seen in the sky earlier. But now it was closer, more tangible, more real than she could have ever imagined. It pulsed with an eerie, unearthly light, and though it was still hovering, it seemed to pulse with an energy that was almost alive. Amelia's heart skipped a beat. She had known it wasn't just a plane, but this? This was no earthly object. It was alien, in every sense of the word. The group of masked figures around her seemed frozen, their attention locked on the object as it hovered just yards away. They had all but forgotten about her, their focus entirely on the strange craft above them. The woman at her side stepped forward, her eyes not leaving the object for a second. Amelia felt a cold chill creep down her spine, a sense of foreboding creeping into her mind. "What is it?" she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "This is what they've been hiding," the woman replied, her voice steady. "This is the beginning." Amelia could feel the woman's words seep into her bones, filling her with a dread that was almost suffocating. The object was here. It had come, and now everything was about to change. The craft flickered for a moment, then sent out a pulse of light, stronger this time, like a laser beam aimed at the ground just ahead of them. The light touched the earth, and as it did, a series of symbols began to appear on the ground, glowing with an unnatural blue hue. Amelia's eyes widened as the symbols formed a circle around them, the intricate shapes shifting and rearranging themselves in an eerie dance. The ground beneath her feet vibrated again, this time in rhythm with the symbols. "What's happening?" she asked, panic rising in her chest. The woman beside her turned to face her, her expression unreadable. "It's showing us the way," she said cryptically. "It's showing you the truth." Amelia's mind was racing. The truth? What truth? She was drowning in questions, but the answers seemed just out of reach. The symbols on the ground began to change again, forming new shapes, new patterns, faster now, almost as if they were alive. She couldn't look away. And then, in a blink of an eye, everything changed. The object above them sent out another pulse, and suddenly, the world around Amelia went dark. The symbols on the ground disappeared. The forest around them vanished. Everything, the sky, the trees, the people, was gone. Amelia found herself standing in an unfamiliar place, surrounded by a cold, metallic landscape that seemed to stretch endlessly in every direction. The air was thick and heavy, a strange hum filling the silence. "What is this?" Amelia asked, her voice cracking. The woman was gone. The figures and masks were gone. It was just Amelia, alone, in this vast, empty world. But then, before her, a figure appeared, tall, humanoid, but not quite human. Its skin was a shade of blue she couldn't comprehend, its features sharp and angular. It was the thing she had feared would happen, the unknown. It stepped forward, its gaze fixed on her. It didn't speak, but somehow, Amelia understood, the answers were here. And the truth, the real truth, was waiting for her. Amelia's eyes darted around the strange, cold metallic landscape that stretched out before her. The silence was deafening. She had been transported, no, taken, from the woods into this alien world. The world she now stood in was unlike anything she had ever seen. There were no trees, no natural features, just cold, smooth surfaces and distant structures that loomed ominously against the horizon. The air felt thick, almost unnatural, as if it wasn't meant for human lungs. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding in her chest. The creature that had appeared before her, its bluish skin glowing faintly in the low light, remained still. It didn't speak, but its presence was overpowering, filling the space around her with an overwhelming sense of authority. This being was not just some alien, it was something much older, much wiser, and somehow, much more dangerous. Amelia's breath quickened. What is this place? She thought. Where am I? Before she could gather her thoughts, the creature stepped forward. Its movements were slow, deliberate, as if it had all the time in the universe. It didn't need to hurry, Amelia was the one who felt the urgency. The creature's large, almond-shaped eyes locked onto hers, its gaze so intense that it felt like it could pierce through her very soul. And then, to her surprise, it spoke. Amelia. The voice wasn't like any voice she had ever heard before. It wasn't the sound of air passing through vocal cords. No, this was a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from the very core of the universe itself. The words were more like thoughts than speech, yet they were crystal clear in her mind. Amelia, you are not here by accident. You were chosen. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't know whether to scream, to run, or to collapse in shock. Her mind couldn't process the enormity of what was happening. She was standing in the middle of an alien landscape, speaking to an alien being that claimed she had been chosen. I don't understand, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Chosen for what? The creature tilted its head slightly, as if considering how best to explain. It didn't move for a long time, its glowing eyes fixed on her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. Your world is not what you think it is. It said, its voice now softer but no less potent. The truth has been hidden from you. Hidden from all of you. Amelia took a cautious step back, her mind spinning with the implications of its words. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaking. What truth? And why me? I'm just a person. A normal person. The creature's gaze softened ever so slightly, but its voice remained firm. You were chosen because you have the ability to see what others cannot. You are not the first, and you will not be the last. But your role is crucial. You must understand what has been hidden. Amelia swallowed hard, trying to absorb what it was saying. But the more she thought about it, the more questions swirled in her head. What do you mean, I can see what others cannot? She asked. I don't know what you're talking about. All I saw was a ship in the sky, something I was never meant to see. But I don't know anything beyond that. The creature seemed to consider her words for a moment. Then, in the blink of an eye, it raised one of its long, slender arms and pointed to a distant structure, a towering, metallic building that rose out of the ground like a jagged spear. You must go there, it said. There is where you will find the answers you seek. And there, you will learn the truth about the world you live in. Amelia's breath caught in her throat. The answers? The truth? What did it mean? Her mind raced, but she couldn't seem to find the words to express the confusion and fear that had gripped her. But, she began, but the creature interrupted her. Do not be afraid, it said, its voice a calming hum. You are more capable than you know. The journey ahead will be difficult, but you will not be alone. There are others, like you. You will find them along the way. But remember, time is running out. Time? Amelia repeated, blinking in confusion. What do you mean by time? The creature remained silent for a long moment, its eyes reflecting a sadness that seemed to transcend time itself. "Your world is dying, Amelia," it finally said, its voice low and heavy with regret. "The people of your world have forgotten what truly matters. They have forgotten their origins, and now, they are on the brink of destruction. But there is still hope. You and those like you are the key to saving everything." Amelia's heart raced in her chest. Her world, dying? It sounded impossible. How could that be? The world she knew, the life she had lived, was so normal, so predictable. And yet, standing here in this alien place, surrounded by beings that seemed to exist beyond her comprehension, she couldn't deny that something was terribly wrong. "I don't know what to believe," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This all feels like a dream, like it's not real." The creature seemed to ponder this for a moment, its glowing eyes never leaving hers. "It is real," it said simply. "And you will come to understand, Amelia. The truth cannot be hidden forever." Without another word, the creature turned and began to walk away, its movements graceful and fluid, as if it were part of the environment itself. Amelia hesitated, still processing the weight of its words, before she took a step forward, following the creature's lead. The metallic ground beneath her feet felt unnaturally smooth, almost as if it were made of some substance that didn't belong on Earth. She could feel the hum of energy in the air, a constant vibration that seemed to reverberate through her very being. The distant structure the creature had pointed to loomed larger with each step she took, growing more ominous as she drew closer. But as Amelia neared the structure, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The silence was unbearable, and the weight of the atmosphere felt heavier with every passing second. And then, without warning, the ground beneath her feet shifted. It was subtle at first, just a faint tremor, but then it grew stronger, as if the very surface of the world was beginning to crack apart. Amelia's heart leapt into her throat as she stumbled, struggling to maintain her balance. And then, the ground split open before her eyes. She gasped as a deep chasm formed beneath her, swallowing the earth and everything around it. The metallic surface of the ground peeled away like paper, revealing a glowing blue abyss that seemed to stretch into infinity. Before she could react, a voice echoed in her mind. "Do not fear. It is not the end. This is just the beginning." The voice was calm, almost soothing, but Amelia felt the hairs on her neck stand up. What was happening? What was this place? She reached out instinctively, her hand hovering over the edge of the chasm. The blue light emanating from the abyss was hypnotic, drawing her in as if it held all the answers. But she hesitated. The pull was too strong, too dangerous. But the creature's words echoed in her mind. "It is not the end. This is just the beginning." Taking a deep breath, Amelia stepped forward, her foot meeting the edge of the chasm. The moment she did, the world around her seemed to shift. The metallic landscape blurred, and a flash of light enveloped her. When the light faded, she was no longer standing on solid ground. She was falling. Amelia felt her body lurch as the world around her twisted and contorted. Her feet no longer touched the ground, instead, she was weightless, suspended in a freefall that seemed to stretch on forever. The blue light surrounded her, pulsing in a rhythmic pattern as though it were alive. It wasn't just light, it was a force, an energy that hummed in her bones, vibrating through every fiber of her being. Her heart pounded in her chest, and panic surged through her, but no matter how much she tried to move or scream, her body felt powerless against the relentless pull of the chasm. It wasn't fear that gripped her now, it was something much deeper, a profound sense of helplessness. What is happening? She thought, her thoughts racing. She had been falling for what felt like hours, but there was no end in sight. The blue abyss, with its glowing veins of energy, stretched out endlessly before her, and no matter how much she strained her eyes, she couldn't make sense of the scene. The light seemed to shift and flicker, creating shapes that danced and merged in her peripheral vision. And then, just when she thought she could no longer bear it, the sensation of falling stopped. It wasn't a gradual deceleration or a gentle touch to the ground, it was as if the entire world had come to an abrupt halt. Amelia's body jerked forward, and she collided with something hard, her arms flailing to protect herself. The impact wasn't painful, but it left her disoriented, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of what had just happened. She opened her eyes and blinked rapidly, trying to adjust to the dim light. Her surroundings had changed again. No longer surrounded by the vast chasm, she found herself standing on solid ground, dark, polished stone that seemed to pulse with the same blue energy she had fallen through. The air was thick with a strange, metallic scent, and the oppressive silence from before had returned, but now it felt different. It was as if she had entered a space where no sound existed at all. Amelia slowly stood up, her knees weak from the disorienting fall. She looked around, taking in her new surroundings. The room, or was it a chamber, was vast, stretching out in all directions. The walls, if they could be called that, were made of a dark, shimmering material that seemed to shift and warp as if it were alive. At the far end of the chamber, she could see faint outlines of structures, but they were too far away to make out. She took a deep breath and began to walk forward, her mind still reeling from the events of the past few hours. What had just happened? Was she still on Earth? Or had she been transported to some otherworldly realm? And what did all of this mean? As she walked, the walls seemed to shift in response to her movements, the patterns on the stone growing more intricate, more complex. It was as if the very space around her was alive, reacting to her presence. She couldn't explain it, but it felt like the room was alive, aware of her every step. She walked for what felt like an eternity, though she had no idea how much time had passed. The chamber seemed endless, stretching on forever, and yet no matter how far she walked, the structures at the far end remained just out of reach. The air grew colder, and the strange hum in her ears returned, now louder and more pronounced, as if it were guiding her forward. Finally, after what felt like an age, she reached the end of the chamber. There, in the center of the room, stood a massive structure. It was unlike anything she had ever seen, tall, angular, and alien in design, it seemed to tower over her. Its surface was covered in intricate patterns, lines that spiraled and twisted in a way that defied human comprehension. It was a monument, a beacon, but what it stood for, what it represented, remained unclear. Amelia approached it cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. As she drew closer, the structure seemed to react to her presence. The patterns on its surface began to glow, shifting in response to her movements, illuminating the chamber with a soft, ethereal light. The hum in the air grew louder, more intense, until it filled the entire space. She could feel it in her chest, a deep, resonating vibration that echoed through her very bones. And then, without warning, the structure split open. Amelia gasped, stumbling backward as the massive doors, or what appeared to be doors, slowly parted. A soft, glowing light spilled out from the opening, spilling across the floor like liquid, casting strange, flickering shadows on the walls. The hum reached a crescendo, vibrating through the air like a living thing, and for a moment, Amelia felt as though she were standing on the edge of something vast and incomprehensible. From within the light, a figure emerged. At first, it was just a silhouette, a dark shape emerging from the brilliance, but as it stepped forward, the light shifted, revealing its features. The figure was humanoid but not human. It was tall, its skin shimmering with a faint blue glow, similar to the creature Amelia had encountered before. Its face was angular, its eyes large and dark, glowing faintly in the dim light. It didn't speak, but as it moved, a sense of overwhelming power filled the room, suffusing the air with an almost palpable weight. Amelia stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. The figure stopped before her, its gaze locking onto hers. And in that moment, Amelia knew, this was no ordinary being. This was something ancient, something powerful, and it had been waiting for her. "You are the one," the figure said, its voice a deep, resonating hum that seemed to echo in Amelia's mind. The words weren't spoken aloud, but rather transmitted directly into her consciousness. The one who will see the truth. Amelia swallowed hard, her throat dry as she tried to process what it was saying. What truth? What do you mean? The figure tilted its head slightly, studying her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. The truth about your world. The truth about what has been hidden from you. The truth about the forces that control everything. What are you talking about? Amelia asked, her voice trembling with a mix of confusion and fear. What forces? What world? The figure's expression softened, though its gaze remained fixed on her. Your world, Amelia, is a construct. A facade. Everything you know, the world you live in, is not what it seems. It was built to deceive you, to keep you blind to the greater reality. The truth has been buried beneath layers of lies and distractions. Amelia's mind reeled. A construct? A facade? It didn't make sense. Was she dreaming? No, the figure continued, its voice firm. This is not a dream. This is the truth. You have been chosen to awaken. To see beyond the veil. The figure extended its arm, and with a single gesture, the room around them shifted. The walls faded away, replaced by a vision, a swirling, chaotic display of images and scenes, each one flashing before Amelia's eyes in rapid succession. She saw Earth, her Earth, but not as it was. She saw cities crumbling, entire civilizations collapsing under the weight of a hidden force. She saw people, ordinary people, blinded to the truth, their lives manipulated by those in power. And at the center of it all, she saw the object from the sky, the alien craft that had started this journey. The figure's voice echoed in her mind once again. The world you know is dying, Amelia. The forces that control it have hidden the truth for centuries. But you are the key. You are the one who can unlock the secrets and bring change. The time has come. Amelia's chest tightened as the images continued to swirl around her. She couldn't process it all. It was too much. Too overwhelming. What do I have to do? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The figure stepped forward, its presence imposing. You must remember. You must awaken the power within you. The key to the truth lies in you, but you have to be willing to see it. Amelia's mind raced, and for the first time, she began to understand. She had been chosen, not by accident, but because she held the power to change everything. But the question that lingered in her mind was one that she didn't yet have an answer to. Was she ready to uncover the truth? Amelia stood frozen in place, her heart racing as the figure in front of her continued to speak. The weight of its words settled heavily in the air, thick with meaning. The truth, it seemed to mock her with its promises, yet no matter how much she yearned for it, she couldn't make sense of the images she had just witnessed. The chamber around her had shifted again, fading into a dark void that threatened to swallow her whole. The walls, once so smooth and polished, now seemed to distort and bend, stretching outward into an endless horizon. The glowing figure, too, seemed to fluctuate with the changing environment, its form flickering like a faulty image on a broken screen. Her thoughts spiraled, a whirlwind of confusion and doubt. The images had been too real, too vivid to ignore, but they didn't make any sense. She had seen the fall of civilizations, the manipulation of humankind, the alien craft. Her mind could hardly keep up with the scope of it all. The idea that the world she had known was nothing more than a construct, a carefully orchestrated illusion, was more than she could comprehend. The figure remained calm, as though the confusion swirling around Amelia was of no consequence. It simply waited, its glowing eyes fixed on her with unwavering intensity. You've seen the truth, Amelia, it said, its voice resonating in her mind. Now you must make a choice. Amelia blinked rapidly, struggling to process the magnitude of what was happening. The figure's words were like a bell tolling in the back of her mind. A choice? She had no idea what choice it was referring to. Was there a way back to the life she knew? Was there a way to undo everything she had just seen? Was there even a way to survive this, whatever this was? She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She felt paralyzed, as though every muscle in her body had been frozen in place. A million thoughts flooded her mind, but none of them seemed to make sense. And yet, the figure before her waited patiently, as though it had all the time in the universe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Amelia found her voice. What choice? What am I supposed to do? The figure's eyes shifted slightly, and Amelia swore she saw a flicker of something, regret, perhaps? Or was it sympathy? But it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, and the figure's voice returned to its calm, methodical tone. You must decide whether to awaken, Amelia. To open your eyes to the truth that lies beyond the veil. To see the world as it truly is. She shook her head, her thoughts spinning. But what does that mean? What do you want me to do? To what end? The figure didn't answer her immediately. Instead, it moved forward, its long, glowing form gliding effortlessly over the shifting ground. It stopped just a few feet in front of her, its presence commanding. There is a war brewing, Amelia. A war that has been waged in the shadows for centuries. It is a war between those who seek to keep the truth hidden, and those who want to expose it for what it truly is. The truth is dangerous, and it has been kept buried for so long that few even know it exists. But you now stand at the crossroads of that war. Amelia's pulse quickened. A war? A hidden war? Her mind raced, but the figure continued, its voice steady, unwavering. You have two choices, Amelia. One path will allow you to return to your world, to continue living in the illusion you once knew. You will forget everything you've seen, everything you've learned. It will be as though none of this ever happened. But in doing so, you will become a pawn, another cog in the machine of control that has held the world captive for so long. Your life will be ordinary, but your choices will no longer be your own. Amelia's chest tightened at the thought of returning to the life she had once known. The idea of forgetting everything, of continuing on without ever knowing the truth, was tempting, almost comforting. But deep down, she knew it wouldn't be the same. She would never be able to unsee what she had witnessed. She would always feel the weight of the truth pressing against her chest. The figure's voice broke through her thoughts. The second path is the path of awakening. If you choose this path, you will become a part of the movement to expose the truth. You will fight for the future of your world, not as it is, but as it should be. You will stand against those who seek to keep humanity in the dark, and you will help others see what lies beyond the veil. But this path is not without sacrifice. The truth is powerful, but it is dangerous. Those who choose it often pay a high price. Amelia felt a chill settle in her bones as the figure's words sank in. The idea of fighting for the future of her world was overwhelming, but the price? What did it mean to pay a high price? Was she ready for that? The figure stepped back slightly, allowing her a moment to process. Amelia's thoughts swirled like a storm. On one hand, she could return to her normal life, the life she knew before all of this began. But that would mean turning her back on everything she had learned, everything she had seen. It would mean living a lie. On the other hand, choosing the path of awakening would mean embracing a truth that had the power to change everything. It would mean standing up for what was right, even if it meant risking everything she held dear. But the stakes were higher than she could ever have imagined. The world, her world, wasn't what she thought it was. The war the figure spoke of was real. The forces of control were not just abstract concepts, they were tangible, dangerous, and they had been operating in the shadows for far longer than anyone could understand. Am I the only one who can make this choice? Amelia asked, her voice shaking slightly. The figure's gaze softened for a moment, a trace of sadness in its eyes. No, it replied. Others will make the choice as well. You are not alone in this. But you must decide for yourself, for your future. Will you awaken to the truth, or will you choose to remain in the darkness? Amelia felt as though the weight of the world was pressing down on her shoulders. The decision was hers and hers alone. There was no one to help her, no one to guide her. She was standing at the crossroads of a war that would determine the fate of humanity, and her choice would shape the future. Amelia began, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't seem to find the courage to speak, to make the decision. Her mind was clouded with doubt, fear, and uncertainty. But deep inside, beneath all the confusion, there was a spark. A flicker of something strong, something unyielding. She couldn't turn away from the truth. She couldn't live a lie. I choose to awaken, Amelia said, her voice trembling but steady. She felt a surge of strength course through her as the words left her mouth. It wasn't an easy decision, and it didn't feel like a victory. But it felt right. She was ready to face whatever came next. The figure nodded, a slow, deliberate motion. For the first time, it seemed to express something akin to approval, or perhaps it was simply the acknowledgement of the path Amelia had chosen. You have made the right choice, it said. The journey ahead will be difficult, but you are not alone. You will find others who share your vision, others who fight for the same cause. Together, you will expose the truth and change the world. As the figure's words echoed in her mind, Amelia felt a surge of determination. The path she had chosen was fraught with uncertainty, but it was also filled with possibility. She was no longer a pawn in someone else's game. She was a player, an agent of change. Where do I go from here? She asked, her voice steady now, no longer trembling with doubt. The figure raised its hand, pointing toward the horizon of the strange, shifting landscape before them. In the distance, Amelia could see movement, figures, shapes, shadows. It was a sign. The movement was already underway. You will find your way, the figure said. But remember, this is only the beginning.